The top 1% don't think better than you, they just think in a way you were never taught. Until now. Most people believe the top 1% are simply smarter, more talented, or luckier than the rest. But the truth? They don't think better, they think differently. Their success doesn't start with talent or hard work. It starts in the mind. It starts with how they respond to pressure when no one's watching, how they choose to see the world, and how they challenge what others blindly accept. The difference between average and extraordinary isn't in how much effort you give, it's in how you think while you're giving it. You've likely been taught since childhood what success is supposed to look like. Go to school, get good grades, work hard, find a stable job, save some money, and retire at 65. If you're lucky, you'll live a good life. That's the script handed to most of us. But let me tell you this, the top 1% tore that script apart a long time ago. They saw that following the rules doesn't guarantee anything. Working harder isn't enough. Stability isn't always safe. They started questioning everything that was taught to them and built their beliefs from experience, not tradition. Let's start with the biggest lie society pushes, that effort alone guarantees success. Yes, effort matters. But countless people work 2 jobs, hustle day and night, and still struggle. So clearly, the equation isn't just work hard equals win. The top 1% know this. That's why they don't just chase effort, they chase effectiveness. They constantly ask, is this moving me forward, or am I just staying busy? That one question separates motion from progress. And then there's the idea of playing it safe. Get a secure job, avoid risk, and hold on tight. That mindset might protect you in the short term, but it makes you fragile in the long term. Why? Because depending on one employer, one income, or one plan makes your entire life vulnerable. The top 1% reject this early. They don't want safety that can be taken away by someone else's decision. They want control. And to get control, they take ownership. They start businesses, invest in themselves, build skills, solve real problems. They create value, because value gives you leverage. And leverage gives you freedom. They also don't believe success should take forever. They don't sit around waiting for things to happen. They make them happen. The average person waits for motivation, for someone to believe in them, for permission to begin. The top 1% don't wait. They move. They prepare themselves so deeply that when the moment comes, they don't have to think twice. They don't believe in perfect timing. They believe in being ready. You were probably told that money is the root of all evil. That it's selfish to want more. But here's how the top 1% think: money is a tool. Nothing more, nothing less. It amplifies who you already are. If you're kind, you'll be kinder with money. If you're wise, you'll create more impact with it. They don't feel guilty for wanting more, they feel responsible. Because they know money buys freedom, time, options, peace of mind, the ability to say no, the ability to build. They see money as fuel for mission, not just material. You were probably taught to stay humble, to not make too much noise. Blend in. Don't draw attention. But the crowd is usually wrong. The top 1% understand that following the crowd will get you the same result the crowd has. And most of the crowd is stuck. Broke. Frustrated. Confused. They realize early that they need to think independently. They make peace with being misunderstood. They'd rather be right in silence than wrong in a group. You've likely heard, "Wait your turn," or "Be patient, it will come." But the people at the top? They don't believe in waiting. They believe in building. They take responsibility for their outcomes. They know no one's coming to hand them the life they want. They aren't owed anything, so they create value, earn their way up, and become so good they can't be ignored. No handouts. Just habits. And when it comes to failure, they don't fear it, they study it. While most people treat failure like a signal to stop, the top 1% treat it like feedback. They know the path to mastery is filled with setbacks. They don't avoid mistakes, they expect them. They extract the lesson, adjust, and go again. Their identity isn't threatened by losses, it's built through them. They don't measure their greatness by how often they succeed, but by how quickly they bounce back. Another belief they challenge: the worship of knowledge. You've probably heard, knowledge is power. But that's incomplete. Knowledge is potential power. It means nothing unless you apply it. The world doesn't reward what you know. It rewards what you do with what you know. The top 1% consume information with urgency, but they don't stop there. They execute. Fast. Messy. Relentless. And they see time differently. Most people act like they have forever. They waste hours like they're infinite. But the top 1% treat time as the most valuable currency. They don't spend it, they invest it. They cut out distractions. They avoid time wasters. They evaluate every action through one lens. Is this bringing me closer to the life I want? They don't just track time, they protect it. Because lost money can be earned again. Lost time is gone forever. Most people let emotions run the show. If they don't feel like it, they don't do it. If they feel tired, they rest. If they feel scared, they back down. But the top 1% operate from decisions, not moods. They lead with discipline. They've trained themselves to separate what they feel from what they must do. That's how they build consistency. That's how they move forward while others stay frozen. And yes, they're grateful. But they also remain hungry. Gratitude doesn't mean you stop aiming higher. It means you appreciate what you have while building what you want. The top 1% don't settle just because they're ahead of others. They keep going, not out of greed, but out of purpose. They know they're capable of more. And that hunger isn't toxic, it's sacred. So ask yourself, are the beliefs you were handed actually helping you build the life you want? If not, it's time to challenge them. Replace them. Rebuild your mindset not around survival, but around winning. Because the world doesn't need more people doing what's expected. It needs people brave enough to question everything and bold enough to act differently. The truth is, most people were raised with a mindset designed to survive. But the top 1% rebuilt theirs to win. That doesn't come from talent. It comes from choice. A decision to question everything they were taught, to challenge what's common, and to craft a way of thinking that supports growth, power, and freedom. You don't need to be smarter. You don't need more degrees. You need to change the lens through which you see the world. Because once your mind changes, everything else follows. That's how the top 1% rise, and that's how you can too. If you want to build a life that rises above the average, there's one brutal truth you need to accept as early as possible. No one is coming to save you. No one is going to swoop into your life with a perfect solution, a bag of money, or the secret strategy that fixes everything. The moment you understand that is the moment your real power begins. The top 1% figured this out a long time ago. That's why they don't wait for opportunity, they create it. They don't beg for permission, they take ownership. They don't expect to be discovered, they make themselves undeniable. And that mindset doesn't come from privilege. It comes from pain. From being tired of waiting. From getting tired of feeling stuck. From choosing responsibility over blame. Most people live in a loop of waiting. Waiting for the right person. The right time. The right opportunity. They think if they're just patient enough, life will eventually reward them. But the clock keeps ticking. Months turn into years, and still, they're waiting. The top 1% don't live that way. They don't wait for rescue, they build resilience. They don't look for someone to unlock the door, they build the damn door. Because they know something average minds never fully grasp. Hope is not a strategy. Waiting is not a plan. The world doesn't owe you help, and no one will fight for your dreams harder than you. You may have grown up wishing someone would understand you. Hoping your boss would notice how hard you work. Wishing your family would finally support your ambitions. But here's the reality. Most people are too focused on their own survival to fix yours. Not because they're cruel. Because they're human. And once you accept that no one is coming to hand you success, you begin to look inward. You begin to take control. You begin to build the life you actually want instead of waiting for one to be handed to you. The top 1% take this mindset into every corner of their life. They don't expect someone else to wake them up in the morning. They don't wait for someone to motivate them. They get up, even when they don't feel like it. They grind, even when nobody's watching. They execute, even when they're tired, uncertain, or overwhelmed. Because they know the responsibility is theirs. That's not just discipline, it's freedom. The freedom that comes from knowing that you control your outcomes. That your life is in your hands. This isn't about being alone. This isn't about rejecting help when it comes. It's about building a foundation that isn't dependent on help in the first place. You don't build confidence by being rescued. You build it by rescuing yourself. Over and over. In small ways. In quiet moments. When it's just you versus the temptation to give up. Most people want success without struggle. They want freedom without sacrifice. But that's not how it works. You don't get control without cost. You pay in hours. You pay in effort. You pay in consistency. And the top 1% know the bill is high, but they're willing to pay it, because they know the reward is control. Control over their time. Their money. Their thoughts. Their future. The mindset of the average says, I'll start when someone believes in me. But the mindset of the 1% says, I believe in myself first. That belief doesn't come from external validation, it comes from execution. From keeping promises when no one's around. From choosing discipline over comfort. From refusing to hand your potential over to someone else's timeline. You've seen it. People who rely on external motivation always crash. They're great when things are exciting. When momentum is high. When people are clapping. But the second it gets hard, they stop. Because their engine wasn't internal. The 1% build internal fire. A drive that doesn't need applause. A focus that doesn't depend on motivation. They don't ask, will someone push me today? They ask, what needs to get done, no matter what? And when they face obstacles, and they do, they don't wait for someone to clear the path. They adapt. They find a way. They pivot. They act. The average waits for permission. The elites start building anyway. They take the loss and learn. They take the delay and adjust. They stay in motion, because movement is power, and power is what separates those who lead from those who watch. You might be in a season right now where it feels like no one sees your effort. No one claps for you. No one encourages you. That's not a sign to stop, it's a sign to grow. You are your own safety net now. Your own motivator. Your own investor. Your own teacher. Your own engine. You can either use that to complain, or you can use it to rise. Because once you stop waiting for rescue, you start training to become unstoppable. The top 1% aren't afraid to say, it's on me. They prefer it that way. Because once it's on you, no one can take it away. No rejection can kill it. No failure can stop it. No delay can delay you. That mindset turns obstacles into puzzles. It turns stress into strategy. It turns fear into fire. Because when you know that you are the solution, you stop wasting energy looking for someone else to be. You want power? Take responsibility. You want momentum? Stop waiting. You want freedom? Build habits no one has to check. That's the real transformation, not from poor to rich, weak to strong, lazy to productive. The real transformation is from waiting to owning. From reaction to creation. From doubt to decision. It's not enough to want more. Everyone wants more. But the 1% take it further. They claim it. They wake up and act like no one is coming. Because that's the truth, and that's the power. No one is coming. And once you understand that, you finally become someone who goes. Every day, you're handed a series of choices, some loud and obvious, some small and subtle, but all of them ask the same fundamental question. Will you choose what is easy, or will you choose what will elevate you? That question sits at the core of every result you've ever created, whether you've realized it or not. The top 1% understand this in their bones. They know that ease is seductive, that comfort feels safe, that doing the bare minimum offers momentary peace. But they also know that nothing great ever comes from living on the edge of effort. Growth lives where most people refuse to go, on the other side of challenge. It's not that the average person doesn't want to improve. Most people desperately want to change their lives. They want more money, more freedom, more control. But their daily choices betray them. When it's time to choose between 10 minutes of discomfort and 10 minutes of distraction, they choose distraction. When it's time to push through a workout or skip it, they skip. When it's time to face an uncomfortable truth or bury it under entertainment, they choose to numb. The top 1% do the opposite. Not because they enjoy pain, but because they respect progress. They've trained themselves to override the default craving for comfort and to instead chase growth. Most people don't even realize they're being programmed by their daily comfort zones. They're slowly becoming weaker, not from lack of ability, but from making decisions that shrink their future. Choosing ease isn't just a temporary escape. It's a vote for stagnation. Every time you skip what challenges you, you reinforce the identity of someone who runs when it gets hard. And the more times you repeat that cycle, the more automatic it becomes. Your mind starts to associate resistance with failure, when in reality, resistance is the first step toward greatness. The top 1% understands something simple but deeply uncomfortable. You cannot build a strong life on weak choices. They do what's required, not what's convenient. They choose the task that builds strength, not the one that just maintains comfort. They recognize that easy, in the short term, almost always leads to hard, in the long term. But hard, right now, the discipline, the effort, the stretch, creates a life that becomes easier because you've become stronger. The goal isn't to avoid discomfort. The goal is to outgrow the need to avoid it. Comfort whispers, stay where it's warm. Growth says, step where it's uncertain. Every leader, every peak performer, every person who's made something great out of their life, at some point, chose to move toward what scared them. They didn't feel ready. They didn't feel perfect. But they went anyway. And because they went, they grew. Because they leaned in, they leveled up. And every time they made that choice, they rewired their brain to crave challenge over safety. Most people are afraid of pain. But what the top 1% fear more is regret. They fear the life they'd be forced to live if they kept saying no to hard things. That's what fuels them. They know that avoidance is a temporary fix. But pride? That comes from knowing you didn't back down. That you faced the resistance and moved anyway. That's how you build something that no one can take away from you, character. And let's be clear, choosing hard doesn't mean overcomplicating your life. It doesn't mean glorifying pain or chasing struggle for the sake of it. It means facing the things that actually grow you. Showing up when it's boring. Staying focused when it's easier to scroll. Finishing when you feel like stopping. Those are the moments that define who you're becoming. Those aren't just actions, they are reps for your character. And character, once built, never leaves you. The world is full of people who have potential but no pressure tolerance. They can dream. They can talk. They can plan. But the moment it gets hard, they fold. They rationalize. They vanish. The top 1% stay. They stay in the room when it gets uncomfortable. They stay on the path when it gets dark. They stay focused when nothing seems to be working, because they understand that discomfort isn't a sign to quit. It's a signal that something real is being built. You don't grow by doing what's easy. You grow by showing up, especially when you don't feel like it. Discipline isn't about motivation. It's about decision. A decision you make every day, even when you're tired, even when you're uninspired, even when there's no external reward in sight. That's where separation happens. Not in the highlight reels. In the unseen hours where most people choose to coast, but the few choose to climb. It's easy to tell yourself that you'll get serious later. That you'll start when life settles down. But that moment never comes. Life doesn't get easier. You get better. And the only way to get better is to pick the hard path today. Because that choice, the one that hurts now, builds strength that lasts forever. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, every time you complete a task you could have skipped, you cast a vote for the version of you who wins. You have to get to a point where quitting feels wrong. Where skipping your workout feels like a betrayal. Where giving up on your schedule feels like abandoning your mission. That mindset? That kind of personal standard? It doesn't come naturally. It comes from thousands of micro-decisions where you told yourself, I'm better than this excuse. I'm stronger than this emotion. I'm not done yet. That's why the top 1% win. Not because they're immune to the temptation to take it easy, but because they overrule it. Daily. They have built an internal culture of standards that won't allow mediocrity to survive. They don't depend on feeling ready. They act when it's time to act. And every time they do, they reinforce the identity of a finisher. Of a warrior. Of someone who does not retreat. You can tell yourself you're not built for this. Or you can become someone who is. Because the truth is, every time you choose hard over easy, you rewire your identity. You move from someone who hopes to someone who builds.
Hi, this is just a quick moment. If this audiobook is helping you in any way, please consider subscribing to this channel. It really helps me keep creating powerful stories like this, ones that make us pause, reflect, and grow stronger. A simple like, a comment, or sharing this with one friend can make a real difference. Not just for the channel, but for someone who might desperately need this message today. So thank you for being here. Let's keep building something meaningful together. Now, back to the journey.
Then step out of bed, the clock is running. And yet, the way people begin that day couldn't be more different. The average person starts in reaction. They roll over, grab their phone, scroll through distractions, absorb noise, and immediately surrender control of their mind to the outside world. But the top 1%? They begin with clarity. They wake up knowing exactly what they want from the day. That single decision changes everything. This is what most people miss. They think a productive life is about getting more things done. But real results don't come from doing more, they come from doing what matters most. The people who move forward fast are not necessarily smarter or faster. They're just sharper, focused, intentionally aligned. While others wander through the day reacting to emails, messages, and distractions, the 1% move with precision. Every action they take is tied to a reason. And that reason is set before the day even begins. Clarity doesn't show up by accident. It has to be chosen, created, locked in early. If you leave it up to chance, the world will make the decision for you. That's why so many people feel stuck. They spend the day busy but not productive, tired but not fulfilled. They confuse motion with progress. They confuse noise with importance. But the top 1% protect their mornings like sacred territory. Because they know the way you begin shapes the way you end. When your morning is foggy, your decisions will be sloppy. When you start with no structure, your day will fall into chaos. And when you don't define what matters, you'll spend your energy chasing what doesn't. The truth is, it's not the world that's holding most people back. It's the absence of direction. Without a target, even effort becomes wasted. You can work hard and still end up in circles if you don't know where you're aiming. The top 1% eliminate that risk entirely. Before the world gets loud, they take time to ask, what matters today? What am I building? What decisions will move me forward? They plan. Not because they want to be robotic, but because they refuse to leave their goals up to chance. They know life will throw punches. But when you've locked in purpose early, those punches don't knock you off course. They just slow you down temporarily. You adjust, you don't collapse. Think about how most people wake up. Their first thoughts are anxiety, obligation, tasks they haven't finished, notifications waiting for a reply. The moment their eyes open, they're behind. But when you start your day by getting clear on your mission, you take the wheel. You shift from passive to proactive. You don't drift, you drive. It's not about a perfect morning routine with 15 steps. It's about intention. 5 minutes of clarity can replace 5 hours of confusion. When you know what matters, you stop chasing everything else. You protect your time. You say no more confidently. You're not afraid of missing out because you already know what you're locked in on. Here's what happens when you begin each day with deep clarity. You eat differently. You think differently. You talk differently. You stop wasting energy on people and problems that aren't tied to your priorities. You stop asking, "What should I do now?" because you already decided. That decision was made in silence. In solitude. Before the chaos showed up. And that silence? That's where power lives. Most people can't sit still. They need noise, movement, distraction. But the top 1% start in stillness. They demand clarity before momentum. They don't rely on motivation. They rely on decisions. And because they've already made the decision to move with purpose, they don't need to hype themselves up. They just execute. You've probably had days where you felt stuck, scattered, overwhelmed, and by nightfall, you were frustrated with how little progress you made. But if you look closely, those days didn't fall apart at 2 p.m., they fell apart the moment you woke up reactive. The way you start shapes the way you show up. You either walk into the day with a target, or become one for other people's agendas. That's not discipline. That's drift. If you want to build a powerful life, you don't need more hacks, you need clarity. Ask yourself before you reach for your phone. What do I want today to mean? What's my outcome? What do I refuse to let distract me? Ask it before the noise shows up. Before life pulls you in 20 directions. Before people start asking for your time. Because once the distractions begin, it's already too late to decide. The decision must be made before the pressure. People think mornings are about caffeine and alarms. But they're about commitment. The commitment to your values. To your future. To your process. The top 1% build momentum before the rest of the world wakes up. Not because they're obsessed with hustle, but because they understand timing. They don't compete with the crowd. They run ahead of it. When you begin with intention, you don't need external validation. You don't need the dopamine rush from social media. You're already fueled. By purpose, by mission, by vision. That energy lasts longer than motivation. It carries you through boredom. It carries you through setbacks. It carries you through the slow days when nothing feels like it's working. If you keep waking up without direction, don't be surprised when your life feels like a loop. Because that's what directionless days create. Repetition without reward. Movement without meaning. You won't remember what you did. You won't feel pride when the day ends. You'll just feel like time slipped away again. That ends when you start your day on purpose. So here's your daily question. What matters most today, and what will I do about it? Not tomorrow. Not someday. Today. Because the difference between people who rise and people who stay stuck often comes down to how they begin their morning. One group waits to feel like it. The other group decides. And you can join them. Right now. Before tomorrow even begins. Take the time. Set the intention. Define your win. Then protect it. That's how the top 1% build consistency. That's how they stay locked in. That's how they reach levels that others only wish for. Not because they're better, but because they don't begin their day wondering what matters. Most people live a life partially muted. They speak in edited sentences. They nod when they want to disagree. They say, "It's fine," when it isn't. They shrink their truths to avoid conflict, dilute their standards to keep peace, and soften their beliefs to stay liked. Over time, that silence turns into tension, into resentment, into self-doubt. But the top 1% don't play that game. They don't silence their voice to make others comfortable. They don't betray their values to keep a seat at the table. They say what they mean, clearly and confidently, without carrying guilt for being real. This is not about being rude. It's about being honest. There's a massive difference. Speaking clearly doesn't mean speaking harshly. It means speaking with conviction. It means you don't let other people's comfort become your cage. You don't pretend to agree when your gut says no. You don't keep relationships alive that are draining you. And most importantly, you don't apologize for being someone who knows what they stand for. From the time we're children, we're taught to be polite, to not make waves, to keep our thoughts quiet so no one gets uncomfortable. That programming runs deep. But the price is high. When you bury your voice to maintain peace, you erode your identity. When you water down your truth to protect feelings, you lose clarity. You stop recognizing your own boundaries. You start becoming what others want, instead of who you actually are. And worst of all, you start believing your truth doesn't matter. The top 1% reject that idea completely. They understand that voice is power. They know that your thoughts, your perspective, your standards, they matter. And if you never speak them, no one will ever understand the depth of who you are. You don't build strong relationships by pretending. You don't gain respect by staying silent. You don't lead by blending in. You lead by standing firm. You become a person of influence not when everyone agrees with you, but when everyone knows exactly where you stand, even if they don't. Yes, it's uncomfortable at first. If you've lived most of your life holding back, the first time you speak up will feel terrifying. You'll question yourself. You'll wonder if it's worth it. But let me tell you this, it is. Because the alternative is a life of quiet regret. A life where you keep saying yes when your soul screams no. A life where you're praised for being easygoing, but inside you feel invisible. Clarity is leadership. The most powerful people in the world don't say more, they say less but clearer. They don't speak to please. They speak to express. And they don't fear judgment, because their voice isn't built for approval, it's built for truth. That's why people follow them. Not because they're loud, but because they're authentic. You've been in that room where someone finally says what everyone else was thinking, but didn't have the courage to voice. And when they speak, the energy changes. The respect shifts. Why? Because truth cuts through noise. It clears the fog. It realigns the space. The top 1% live in that space. They don't wait for permission to say what matters. They say it, not to hurt, but to heal confusion. To correct direction. To honor themselves. And yes, sometimes people walk away when you get honest. That's okay. Let them. Because the people who can handle your truth are not the ones meant to build your future. Keeping them in your circle just delays your growth. When you edit yourself to keep people around, you're not preserving peace, you're postponing alignment. And that delay becomes distance, from your own values, your own power, your own mission. You don't need to yell. You don't need to argue. You just need to speak with certainty. With calm power. With self-respect. And every time you do that, every time you speak up, even when your voice shakes, you rebuild your identity. You show yourself that you are someone who can be trusted. That you don't back down from truth just because it's inconvenient. This is where real confidence comes from, not from affirmations, not from fake positivity, but from living in full alignment. Saying what you believe. Protecting your peace. Making decisions that reflect your actual standards. That's when life starts to feel clear. That's when stress begins to fade. Because nothing weighs heavier than a life of suppressed expression. And nothing feels lighter than a life where your voice is free. If you've been afraid of being judged, ask yourself this: what is the cost of staying quiet? How many moments have passed where you didn't say what needed to be said? How many opportunities did you walk away from because you didn't express your truth? How much of your life has been built to keep other people comfortable while you carry the discomfort? It's time to release that. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be real. Say what's on your mind. Draw your boundaries. Share your opinion. Ask for what you need. Walk away when something violates your values. And don't carry guilt for being honest. Because the people who respect themselves respect others more, not less. You can care deeply and still disagree. You can love someone and still say no. You can be kind and still be clear. Don't confuse passivity for peace. And don't confuse approval for acceptance. The people who truly accept you will welcome your truth. The ones who don't? They were never meant to hold space in your future. So speak. Speak with purpose. Speak with peace. Speak with unapologetic truth. And watch how your world shifts. Your relationships will either rise or fall, but at least now they'll be real. And most importantly, you'll rise. Because every time you refuse to shrink, you step deeper into your potential. And that is how the top 1% live, not hidden behind silence, but revealed through strength. The truth is simple. If you don't take command of your day will take command of you. And when your day controls you, it doesn't just steal your time, it hijacks your focus, clouds your thoughts, and fractures your discipline. Most people don't realize this. They think their stress is the result of being busy, but in reality, it's the result of being reactive. It's not the tasks that break them, it's the lack of intentional structure. The top 1% know that if they don't lead the day with discipline, the day will lead them with distraction. You see it everywhere. People waking up and immediately surrendering their mental real estate to the outside world. The first thing they reach for is their phone. Notifications flood their mind before a single goal has been set. Messages, social media, emails, all shouting for attention. Before they've even left bed, they've already lost control. The problem isn't the phone, it's the lack of purpose. Without a plan, the world will assign one to you. And it won't be aligned with your vision, it will be aligned with theirs. The top 1% don't begin the day like that. They start from the inside. They begin with stillness, not noise. Intention, not urgency. Structure, not guesswork. Before they let the world in, they set their world. Because once the outside starts pulling, if you haven't locked in your mindset, you will bend to whatever is loudest. That's not leadership. That's mental chaos. Control isn't about perfection. It's about direction. You won't control every event that happens during the day, but you can control your responses. You can decide what gets your energy. You can create the frame that keeps your mind in alignment. But to do that, you need clarity. You need a plan. You need to start your day like a commander, not a casualty. The reason most people feel exhausted is not because they're doing too much, it's because they're doing too much of what doesn't matter. Their schedule is filled with low-value tasks, unfiltered requests, distractions disguised as opportunities. They confuse movement with effectiveness. And by the end of the day, they're mentally drained with nothing meaningful to show for it. The top 1% never let that happen for too long. If something isn't working, they change it. If something is draining their focus, they cut it. They don't just manage time, they guard it. Because time is not just a resource, it's a reflection of who you are. What you give your time to reveals your real priorities. And your schedule is not just a calendar, it's your identity in motion. If your day is scattered, your outcomes will be too. If your attention is fractured, so will your growth be. The 1% understand this with absolute clarity. They structure their day not to impress anyone, but to protect their mind. You have to treat your mental bandwidth like your most precious asset. Because it is. If your mind is chaotic, everything else will feel heavier. Every decision will feel harder. Every task will take longer. Not because it's difficult, but because your mental clarity was stolen before the work even started. So what do the top performers do differently? They decide. They decide before the day begins what their priorities are. They decide what gets their attention and what gets ignored. They decide when they work, when they think, when they rest. That structure becomes their power source. It eliminates unnecessary decisions. It frees them from constant reactivity. It gives them leverage, mental, emotional, and strategic. This is what most people don't get. Structure isn't a cage. It's freedom. When your priorities are clear, you don't waste energy wondering what to do next. You just do it. You don't spiral when things go wrong. You realign. You don't panic when the pressure comes. You perform. Because the hard decisions were made in advance. And that's what separates the 1%. They don't get ready. They stay ready. It's not about cramming your day with tasks. It's about identifying what matters most and making space for it. You don't need more time. You need more clarity. You don't need a longer to-do list. You need a shorter, sharper, more focused one. And you need to protect that list like your life depends on it, because your future does. Your calendar should reflect your future, not your fears. If your day is filled with low-impact habits, people-pleasing, and reactive energy, it means your boundaries are broken. The 1% enforce their boundaries with precision. They know what deserves their mind and what doesn't. They're not afraid to say no. Not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. Because they understand this principle. When you say yes to everything, you're unconsciously saying no to your greatest work. And that trade is too expensive. Control also means recovery. The top 1% don't burn themselves out chasing every hour. They plan recovery into their system. But it's not mindless scrolling or random breaks. It's intentional. Recovery is scheduled. It's protected. It recharges purpose, not just energy. That's why their performance is sustainable. It's not a sprint. It's strategic endurance. So ask yourself, are you designing your day, or are you just surviving it? Are you building momentum, or reacting to interruptions? Are you shaping your life, or is life shaping you? You might not control the world, but you can control your actions. You can control your energy. You can control how you begin your day and how you recover from setbacks. That's all the control you need to change everything. Stop saying you're overwhelmed. Start getting organized. Stop saying you're behind. Start cutting what doesn't move you forward. Stop saying you're too busy. Start owning what gets your yes. Because the moment you stop blaming the day and start designing it, is the moment you take back the power you've been giving away for years. That's what the top 1% know. That's why they win. Not because their days are easy, but because they lead them. There comes a point in every serious person's journey where a quiet but brutal question has to be asked. Who around me is actually helping me grow? And who is slowly holding me back? This question is uncomfortable. It threatens old friendships. It disturbs long-standing loyalties. But it's also essential. Because if you don't ask it, you will spend years carrying people who were never meant to walk.
Hi, this is just a quick moment. If this audiobook is helping you in any way, please consider subscribing to this channel. It really helps me keep creating powerful stories like this, ones that make us pause, reflect, and grow stronger. A simple like, a comment, or sharing this with one friend can make a real difference. Not just for the channel, but for someone who might desperately need this message today. So thank you for being here. Let's keep building something meaningful together. Now, back to the journey.
They confuse proximity with purpose. They stay loyal to the past and sabotage their future. The top 1% don't make that mistake. They're not cold. They're clear. They understand that your environment is not neutral. It's shaping you every single day. The conversations you tolerate. The standards you adopt. The energy you absorb. It all compounds. And over time, if your circle doesn't reflect your mission starts to shrink to fit your circle. You cannot build something powerful while surrounded by people who don't believe in power. You can't stay driven around people who normalize mediocrity. You can't stay disciplined around people who constantly validate distraction. You can't reach for your potential while surrounded by people who have given up on theirs. Here's what it looks like when someone drains your drive. Every time you talk about your goals, they roll their eyes. Every time you talk about change, they remind you of who you used to be. They tell you to relax, take it easy, don't take life so seriously. And they might not say it in cruel words. They might even laugh while they say it. But the effect is the same. They dim your fire. And if you keep them around long enough, you will start dimming it yourself. This is not about hating anyone. This is not about superiority. It's about alignment. It's about protecting the mental environment you need to thrive. And the top 1% take that protection very seriously. They're ruthless about their circle, not because they're arrogant, but because they know their energy is finite. Every conversation either sharpens you or softens you. Every relationship either lifts your standards or lowers them. And you can't afford to guess which one it is anymore. Some people are amazing for your comfort, but terrible for your progress. They make you laugh, they make you feel accepted, but they do not challenge you. They do not push you. They do not call you higher. And over time, those relationships become emotional quicksand. You feel stuck, and you don't even know why. Your mind starts to blur your purpose because the people around you don't reflect it. You don't have to announce your departure. You don't have to fight. You just adjust your access. Energy is currency. Stop spending it on people who can't grow with you. You owe loyalty to your future, not your history. You owe consistency to your standards, not your comfort. You owe your life's mission the right people, not just the familiar ones. Ask yourself, after I spend time with this person, am I more focused or more distracted? Am I clearer or more confused? Do I feel lighter or heavier? Inspired or drained? Your body knows. Your soul knows. Don't ignore the signals. It doesn't matter if they've been in your life for 10 years. If they're no longer aligned, they're no longer required. The top 1% know that time spent together is not a valid excuse to slow down. Just because someone was there when you were weak doesn't mean they should stay when you become strong. Growth requires space, and sometimes space means distance. You've got to make peace with being misunderstood. When you start elevating, people will accuse you of changing. And they're right, you are. That's the point. You're not supposed to stay the same. Evolution demands separation. And separation demands clarity. Don't keep explaining your growth to people who are committed to standing still. Don't keep hoping they'll catch up. If they wanted to, they would. And if they don't, your responsibility is to keep going anyway. Because your future cannot be sacrificed for someone else's refusal to change. And this isn't about isolation. It's about selection. You don't need to walk alone, you just need to walk with people who walk like you. People who match your hunger. People who see your progress as a starting point, not a threat. People who don't need constant explanations, because they understand the language of discipline, of discomfort, of dreams. The top 1% know their circle is not a social convenience, it's a strategic asset. They don't build it by accident. They build it with intention, with standards, with integrity. And because of that, they don't have to explain their mindset every day, they just live it. Let go of people who laugh at your effort, who mock your consistency, who challenge your standards just because they don't want to raise theirs. You don't have to fix them. You don't have to carry them. You just have to protect your path. And here's the hardest truth. You can't take everyone with you. If you try, you'll slow down, and your mission will suffer. And deep down you know it. The ones who want to go with you will grow with you. The rest? Wish them well, and walk forward. Because your energy is fuel. And you can't afford to waste it on people who can't handle the heat of your future. The top 1% don't let emotional guilt sabotage their greatness. They choose focus over familiarity, vision over validation, purpose over people-pleasing. And so can you. You just have to decide that your mission matters more than their opinion. Once you make that decision, everything changes. Quitting doesn't start with big decisions. It starts with small negotiations. It's the voice in your head that whispers, "Just this once, skip it. You've done enough. Take it easy today." And maybe at first, it feels uncomfortable. Maybe you even fight it a little. But if you listen to it once, it gets louder. If you obey it twice, it starts to feel normal. And by the third time, it becomes a habit. The most dangerous thing about quitting isn't the act, it's how natural it starts to feel after repetition. Most people don't fail because they're not capable. They fail because they stop. They convince themselves that discomfort is a sign to pause. That tiredness is an excuse to delay. That slow progress means it's time to change direction. But the top 1%? They don't think that way. They've trained themselves to stay in the fire, to lean into resistance, to keep moving forward, especially when their mind is screaming to stop. They don't wait for it to feel good. They don't expect it to be easy. They challenge themselves until quitting feels unnatural, until backing down feels wrong, until giving up doesn't even cross their mind. Because they've done the reps. Mentally, physically, emotionally. Their threshold for challenge is so high, most people can't understand how they keep going. But it's not a superpower. It's a system. A mindset. A choice made again and again. They see every challenge as training. Every moment they want to stop is a chance to build identity. The identity of someone who doesn't fold under pressure. Someone who doesn't retreat when it gets boring. Someone who doesn't adjust their goals based on how they feel, but based on what they decided. You can't become mentally strong by living in comfort. You can't become consistent by choosing convenience. You can't level up by quitting every time it gets tough. Growth lives on the edge of challenge. And until you push that edge consistently, you'll keep reinforcing the wrong identity. The identity of someone who gives up too soon. The top 1% know this. They train for it. They don't avoid hard, they hunt it. Not recklessly, not for the sake of suffering, but because they understand something most people don't. Hard things build strong people. And they want to be the strongest version of themselves, mentally, emotionally, physically. Not because it looks good on paper, but because strength gives them options. Strength buys them freedom. Strength makes them anti-fragile. You want to be unshakable? Train for it. You want to be someone who doesn't break when things get hard? Do hard things on purpose. Challenge yourself before life does. Push when no one's watching. Show up when motivation is gone. Execute when your mind says stop. Because every time you override that urge to quit, you send a signal to your brain. This is who I am now. And that identity? It gets stronger with every rep. Most people don't challenge themselves because they've never practiced. They don't even know what it feels like to push past the first wave of resistance. They assume that discomfort is a warning. But for the 1%, discomfort is a trigger. A signal that this is the work. The kind of work that makes you better, not just today, but forever. You don't need to run a marathon to challenge yourself. You just need to keep the promises you made to yourself. Wake up when you said you would. Finish the workout you planned. Write when you said you'd write. Push 5 minutes longer than your mind says is okay. It's small friction, repeated daily. That rewires your system from quit to continue. Because here's the truth, quitting is a pattern. But so is persistence. You decide which one becomes your default. You're not locked into who you've been. You can change the code. But you have to stop responding to the first wave of fatigue like it's a crisis. It's not. It's a cue. A cue to go further. A cue to finish anyway. The people who rise to the top don't have more energy. They've built more capacity. They don't have fewer problems. They've built more pressure tolerance. And the only way to build that tolerance is to stay in the reps longer than you used to. When it gets hard, they get harder. When it gets heavy, they dig deeper. When it gets boring, they lock in harder. That's not just mental strength. That's identity mastery. And you can't fake that. It's earned. In moments no one sees. On days that feel ordinary. In reps that feel invisible. But every time you complete them, you evolve. You expand. You rewire your default from give in to go again. Most people are stuck not because they lack talent, but because they keep quitting right before the breakthrough. Right before the pattern clicks. Right before the discipline kicks in. Right before the progress compounds. They've never stayed long enough to feel the shift. So they live in a loop, start, stop, regret, repeat. Break the loop. Decide that you're done being the person who almost gets there. Be the one who finishes. The one who keeps going. Not just once, but every time it matters. Every time it's easier not to. Every time the excuses sound reasonable. Because that's when your identity is being rewritten. That's when strength is being installed. And here's the thing, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to keep showing up. Even if you mess up, show up. Even if it's slower than you wanted, keep moving. Even if no one claps, finish anyway. Because confidence isn't built from applause, it's built from completion. That's what separates the 1% from the rest. Not their gifts, but their grit. Not their motivation, but their mastery of repetition. They don't get tired less often, they just quit less often. And every time they don't quit, their identity gets louder, stronger, sharper. So train yourself. Every single day. Challenge yourself until quitting no longer feels normal. Push until the old pattern breaks. Until the excuses lose their power. Until you no longer need discipline to show up. Because showing up is who you are. And that shift? That's the one that changes everything. If there's one principle that quietly determines the strength of your confidence, the sharpness of your discipline, and the power of your identity, it's this: do you keep promises to yourself? Not to your boss. Not to your friends. Not to the world. But to you. Because the relationship you have with your own word is the foundation of everything. And most people? They break that foundation every day, without even realizing it. They say they'll wake up early, but they hit snooze. They say they'll eat clean, but they fold at the first craving. They say they'll focus, but they scroll. They say they'll finish, but they flinch. And then they wonder why their confidence is low, their discipline is shaky, and their results are inconsistent. But the top 1% live by a different law: if I say it, I mean it. And if I mean it, I do it. That's not about ego, it's about integrity. It's not about looking perfect, it's about becoming reliable, first to yourself. Because here's the raw truth: every time you break a promise to yourself, you're not just delaying a task, you're damaging your self-trust. And without self-trust, you will always depend on external motivation. You'll always wait for accountability from someone else. You'll always need pressure from the outside, because you don't believe your own voice is enough to move you. The people at the top? They don't wait to feel motivated. They don't need someone to check in. Their motivation is their word. Their progress is their proof. Their identity is rooted in consistency. They're not perfect, but they're predictable. If they said it, they'll do it, even if it's uncomfortable, inconvenient, or unseen. Confidence doesn't come from hype. It comes from execution. You want to feel proud of yourself? Stop chasing dopamine and start collecting kept promises. Start stacking small wins that nobody sees. Start completing the workouts you said you'd do. Finish the book you said you'd read. Stick to the routine you committed to, even when it's boring, even when it's quiet, even when it feels like nobody cares. You care. And that's enough. That's the difference. Average people break promises and justify it. I was tired. It didn't matter. I'll start fresh tomorrow. And over time, their own mind stops believing them. They say, this time I'm serious. But their subconscious says, no, you're not. Because it remembers the patterns. It remembers the excuses. It keeps score. But when you keep your own promises, even small ones, something shifts. Your brain starts trusting you again. You say, I'll do it. And your identity agrees. No resistance. No hesitation. Just follow through. And that momentum? It's quiet. But it compounds. It builds a version of you that doesn't flinch, doesn't quit, and doesn't need permission to win. The top 1% don't speak their goals for applause. They live their goals through commitment. They don't set resolutions, they build systems. They don't obsess over perfect plans, they focus on promises executed daily. They protect their own word like a contract. Because they know this: if your word doesn't matter to you, nothing else will. And it starts small. It's not about doing 100 things. It's about doing the one thing you said you would, no matter what. That's how the pattern is rebuilt. That's how self-respect is restored. Not with grand gestures, but with micro-integrity. With decisions made and followed through on when nobody's watching. If you said you'd wake up at 6 o'clock, wake up. If you said you'd meditate, sit down and breathe. If you said you'd read, open the book. Not for results. Not for praise. For discipline. For identity. For you. Because when you keep promises to yourself, you no longer need other people to believe in you. You believe in you. You don't need someone to check on you. You are self-led. You don't need external reminders, because your internal alignment is already locked in. That's the freedom. That's the fire. That's what makes you unstoppable. Not your talent, not your ideas, but your execution of your own word. And when you break that word, don't hide. Don't lie to yourself. Don't minimize it. Own it. Call it out. Fix it. Not from shame, but from awareness. Because the longer you let self-betrayal slide, the deeper it roots into your identity. And identity governs behavior. You're not weak. You're just untrained. But that can change. Today, you don't rebuild trust with yourself in one big moment. You rebuild it by showing up one decision at a time. One kept promise at a time. Until your mind no longer doubts you. Until the idea of skipping your commitment feels wrong. Until your habits become your minimum, not your maximum. That's where power lives. Because when your self-trust is solid, you don't need to speak loudly. Your consistency does it for you. People see your discipline. They feel your energy. They trust you because you trust yourself. You show up differently. You move differently. You lead differently. So start now. Not Monday. Not next month. Now. Keep one promise today. Just one. Make it non-negotiable. Then do it again tomorrow. And again the next day. Build the streak. Build the identity. Build the respect. And soon you'll notice something. You'll no longer need to get motivated. You won't be chasing productivity hacks. You'll be operating as someone who follows through. And that version of you? That's the one who wins. Quietly. Consistently. Powerfully. Because your life isn't built by what you say. It's built by what you consistently finish. And it all starts with how seriously you take the promises you make to the one person who matters most, you. Every day, you are faced with a choice that seems small, but it holds the weight of your entire future. Do you choose what feels good right now, or do you choose what builds a better life later? That's the line. That's the invisible fork in the road that separates the top 1% from the rest. Most people don't consciously make this decision. They act on instinct, emotion, impulse. They seek relief, comfort, entertainment. But the 1%, they pause. They consider. They think not just about how this action feels, but what it costs. Quick pleasure is seductive. It promises you ease. It offers you distraction. It says, you've earned this. And maybe you have. But the question isn't, did you earn it? The question is, does it serve you? Because the cost of quick pleasure is never paid now. It's paid in regret. In lost momentum. In broken routines. In time you can't get back. And the more you choose comfort without consequence, the more you trade your power for a few moments of escape. The top 1% see this clearly. They've trained themselves to ask a better question. What will this cost me? Not just in money. In time. In focus. In energy. In standards. They understand that every decision is a vote for the future they want or the one they're settling for. Every skipped workout, every delayed task, every mindless hour lost to scrolling isn't just a loss in productivity, it's a dent in discipline. And discipline is what holds everything else together. People say they want freedom. But freedom isn't found in doing whatever you feel like. Freedom is the result of self-mastery. Of choosing hard now so life gets easier later. Of sacrificing the high of today for the strength of tomorrow. The top 1% don't live like monks. They enjoy life. but they enjoy it intentionally. They don't indulge to escape, they indulge after they've earned it. With structure. With balance. With control. Most people are stuck not because they're lazy, but because they've normalized short-term comfort as a way of life. They don't see that every just 5 more minutes is training their brain to delay discipline. They don't realize that every time they choose distraction over purpose, they weaken the muscles that build consistency. And over time, it's not the big failures that destroy them, it's the daily drift. The slow erosion of standards. The quiet surrender of their potential. You've felt it before. That moment when you know you should act, but you choose to delay. You feel the tension and you think, one time won't matter. And you're right, one time won't break you. But it will shape you. It becomes easier to make the same choice again. And again. Until your habits are no longer leading you toward the life you want, they're leading you away. Ramit. The top 1% reverse that cycle. They don't wait to feel like doing the right thing, they act anyway. They don't always want to push, but they push. They don't always feel aligned, but they align through action. They treat their time like currency, their energy like capital, and their attention like a vault that only the most valuable tasks are allowed into. Because they know that every choice compounds. Every late night without purpose affects the next morning. Every skipped task bleeds into the next day's schedule. Every excuse becomes a system. And once a system is built, good or bad, it runs automatically. You need to build systems that serve your highest self. Systems that reward discipline. That protect your focus. That limit the amount of decisions you have to make. Because your values already made them for you. You don't need willpower when your environment is set up for success. You just need to respect the cost of short-term pleasure. So the next time you're faced with the urge to scroll, to quit early, to indulge in something that derails your mission, pause. Ask yourself, is this who I'm becoming? Is this building my future? Or am I just numbing something I don't want to face? That's the real question. Most pleasure-seeking behavior is a form of avoidance. Avoiding boredom. Avoiding work. Avoiding stress. But avoidance accumulates. And what you avoid today becomes the pain you feel tomorrow. Discipline hurts, yes. But regret hurts more. And regret never leaves. It stays. It lingers. It whispers in the silence of your potential. It shows up at night when the noise fades. When you realize you could have been more. You could have done better. But you chose to feel good instead of feel proud. That's the trade. The trade you make every day. And when you stack enough days where discipline beats pleasure, you start to transform. Not just in results, but in identity. You become someone who leads their mind. Who respects their time. Who values legacy over laziness. This is the hidden truth of high performers. They respect consequences. They don't fear them, they calculate them. And they use that calculation to make better choices. They understand the principle of delayed gratification. And more importantly, they trust that the pain of discipline is always worth it. You can feel good right now. Or you can feel proud forever. You can choose comfort. Or you can choose capacity. But you can't choose both. Not consistently. Not simultaneously. One leads to a life of control. The other leads to a life of excuses. So here's the challenge. Think before you act. Pause before you react. Consider before you consume. Respect what this moment means for your future. Because this moment is your future, it's either building it or breaking it. And you're the one who gets to decide. That's how the top 1% live. Not perfectly, but intentionally. Not without temptation, but without surrender. And that's the real power, not in always doing the right thing, but in never forgetting what it costs when you don't.
You made it to the end. That says everything about the kind of person you are, driven, focused, and ready to build a life that truly matters. If this audiobook moved you, please subscribe to the channel. It's the best way to support these messages, and it helps me create more powerful audiobooks like this one. There's a full playlist waiting for you, packed with motivation, discipline, and stories that will keep you going when things get tough. So don't stop here. Click the playlist, keep growing, and share this with someone who needs it today. From my heart, thank you for listening. We're just getting started.